Hello, hello. How is everyone doing today?
Good.
Doing really well.
Good, good. Wonderful Wednesday. Well, it's freezing cold here and our -5 I saw this morning. At least we're having some nice bright sun to keep our vitamin D levels going, right? Perfect. Well, we'll give everyone a few minutes to log in as we get everything going. We're very excited with our wonderful lineup of speakers here, and we have some great content to share with you today. So, yeah, I see some familiar faces in the room that have been to a few of these. So it's good to see people coming back and engaging in the full spectrum of the information that's being presented. I don't hear a lot of networking, guys. We're not doing our normal chatter this morning. Is everyone just a little cold from the tundra outside? All right. Well, with that, we will go ahead and get started. So if you are not speaking at this point, we'll ask that you turn off your microphones. But as a request by our speakers, we do ask that if you're able and comfortable, please leave your cameras on, as we like to present to faces rather than screens. Well, it's all screen, but faces on the screen, giving us an opportunity to really engage a little bit more with the guests that are here with us today. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And can everyone see that okay? I think so. Am I seeing some nods? Perfect. All right. Well, welcome, as I said, to Networking for Nonprofits, Seminar 5 on Funding, hosted by John and Jim and presented by myself. No, that's opposite. Presented by John and Jim and hosted by myself, Michael Donnelly. Vanessa is here, as I said, for support. Vanessa, if you see individuals popping into the waiting room, can you make sure to help me out and let them in? Perfect. Sure. All right. Do we have those guests in? There's 3 or 4. All right. Awesome. Okay, the presenters, as I said, we have John Knobel of Noble Cause Consulting, Jim Stone, the president of Stone Family Foundation, myself, Michael Donnelly, as your MC and host, Vanessa Ori, who many of you have probably emailed with, but not seen as much in person because of this pandemic. She is event support today and the executive assistant at the Stone Family Foundation. We also have Karen Foley of JPA, Griffin Amdur of Chicago Furniture Bank, Laura Starr of Community Health, Sherry Gibson of Above and Beyond, Jane Rosendale of Advocate Capital Advisors, and Stephanie Bynum of Coles Children's Museum. So our agenda for the day is, we do have a quick recap. Jim will go over some of the details from Seminar 1, which was focused on networking framework, Seminar 2, which was growth through networking, Seminar 3, which was relationship development, Seminar 4, which we just had back in September, which was strengthen operations. Over the course of the rest of this morning, we will be talking about funding. Jim will be speaking on mining your network for funds. John will go over the 5 phases of the funding journey, and then each of our guest speakers will give some real world cases or examples of how they've reached funding success within their organizations, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. Our next seminar will be on resources and implementation, and then we do want to introduce another related seminar. This is an organization that I run called Forward Collective. We'll be hosting a summit this coming March called Heart, Mind, and Bottom Line. So that'll be in the follow-up email that we'll send out to everyone. Okay, and without further ado, I will introduce Jim and go ahead and switch our slides over. And Jim, just so you know, we can't see your camera right now, so I'm not sure if that's blocked. Oh, there you are. Okay, and Jim's slides. All right, can everyone see that? Perfect. Jim, I'll let you take it away.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jim Stone, one of the founders of Networking for Nonprofits. And what we do in a word is we have a mission that's similar, if not identical, to each of yours. We're trying to benefit the underserved. We do it through nonprofits. This is because nonprofits are the best organizations to deliver the needs for those who require extra help to get themselves into the mainstream. Seminar 5, Bridges, the first 4 seminars, and the next several. 1 to 5, as Michael indicated, dealt with networking, which is what it's all about and what to do with it, growth, focusing on how 1 or 2 good networking institutions with your institution can bring about rapid growth in your nonprofit. The third one was on relation development, and that's a bit of business information and active work to be in contact with all people that you can get into your relationship group, and what they can do for you, what you can do for them, and how you're progressing. So that's an important form of your business, equally as important, I believe, as keeping your P&L and balance sheet up to date. And finally, we talked about strengthening operations, that you can do many practical, common sense things to strengthen the organization. And by having your ears to the market and listening to your clients and prospects, you then can figure out what needs to be strengthened and how to do it. Okay, next slide. Since we started, we've accomplished a great deal. It's about 2.5 years. Here's what some of the results look like, so you get a sense of what we're trying to do. Okay, we partnered with a large children's museum to provide 1,500 science kits to schools and parents. We got excellent feedback on that. The organization wants to do more, and the people that received them are very interesting. It's a way for students to do meaningful work, both in school and at home with their parents. 2, we've worked with an organization that delivers furniture, furnishes a house free to no cost for people who are qualified and in need. 3, another one that grows gardens in schools and grows fruits and vegetables at the student's home through their parents through food bags. 4, we located a group of active Harvard graduate tutors to teach detainees who are leaving prison to gain their GED test, which is an advantage to employment. And number 5, which is in progress, we've been working on this for 2 years or more. It's a program where grandmothers in general can care and supervise for children at home while the parents have free time to earn a living and to live a regular life. The more we probed into this, we found out that it was very successful in Africa, but little has been done in the US. So we're in the process of attempting to modify this for what we need here in Chicago and put it into practice. Okay, the next slide presents a group of case studies whereby networking for funding yields results. You've got the matrix in front of you. We've put it down. We've got the category is, this is one way of organizing it, and we just put it down for our use. You would have different ways of organizing. So across the top, we've got the category, what kind of funding are we looking for, or are we in front of? 2, who's the nonprofits that receive them or that are going to put this into effect, be in the equation. 3, the contacts. 4, keeping this in an up-to-date matrix. Have we received the funds, or do we need more funds? From whom? What are we going to do next, and actions to be taken? Let me just go through two of them quickly so you get the idea. The first one is an outlier, large donor special gift, nonprofit Evanston Fire Department. Contact Dan Biss, Mayor of Evanston. Received $800,000 fire engine. From whom? Was funded by Northwestern University. So now we have that article. What do we do about it? One, we know we have a contact here, Dan Biss. Many people know him. And two, in the article, it says that he and the president of Northwestern want to benefit the whole community. So the action we take, we have two things to do, at least. One is to call Dan Biss, tell him that we're also in the business of improving the Evanston community, and what can we, what are the things that we can do to help. And then two, there's a music school that asked us to invest in a Suzuki project for low income students whose school is at a church, and they don't have any funds or any way to get into music. So we have that started. And then if we go down to the bottom very quickly, everything we think about money is rational, but there is a category we call it sentimental, emotional, intuitive, and not rational. And one, we're working with a non-for-profit who works with homeless and addicted to bring them into the mainstream. The contact is confidential. We don't have clearance. They've done things to start up on their own through their own net worth. They got a low-cost building. They got some people that understand food, gardening, and so on. And they got some contributors. Okay, but from whom? Well, they got distributors of food, free food, like Chicago Food Depository, who want to put it in pantries in order to get it to the public that needs it. Calling farmers, we're talking to, we've got 18 so far organizations that distribute food free or have tentacles for it, and we're working through them to see what their program is and try to integrate into it. So what to do next? The first pantry is running, the second's under construction, and we keep looking for partners in all aspects of this, but particularly in funding. And what's important is if you have something up and going, no matter how small, and it's going and it's doing the job, it's visible, it's observable, and so on, your chances for getting additional funding, I would say, go up about 100%. And the actions we're continuing to discuss in our organization and in other nonprofits, including this one, strategic relationships for free food, and we brought in one of them who grows food in schools and at home. Okay, finally, what we're going to do, what we're going to hear from our speakers is real life cases, actual work that they've done, and accomplishments. Everything we do, see, read, discuss, and so on, and it leads to networking for profits. One, it gives us clues to provide for the underserved. Two, it encourages us and forces us to do more thinking, talking, and otherwise networking as to how to fund. And three, keep in mind that funding is very complicated until you do it. And then it becomes not complicated anymore because you know what you have to do. In fact, it becomes fun and inspiring. Let me introduce John Knoebel. one of our founders, who will lay out a conceptual framework for approaching funding. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, John.
Be able to see my screen?
Not just yet.
Oh, I forgot to hit share. All right, give me 1 second. I gotta hit share. Yep. Screen one, share. There we go.
Perfect.
Sorry about that, but good morning, everybody. Today we're going to focus on applying the networking mindset for growth on funding our organizations. And the 3 themes that we'll explore, which should be noted, are funding relationships replacing transactions, looking at resource plans and audits through the networked lens, and understanding strengths which can be enhanced and weaknesses which can be mitigated or eliminated using the network mindset. So I should mention the informal goal of all good funding is to make the person responsible for funding your organization look like a Marvel superhero for making the decision to provide resources to you. And the one thing of which I'm sure is that there are a number of attendees of this workshop that are very accomplished in funding your organizations. And I'm going to suggest that we explore whether the networking mindset for growth can enhance your efforts and strengthen your relationship with funders. And as we know, relationship development depends on mutual communication and understanding. So this opens with an opportunity to ask, how can the relationship with my organization help the funder reach their philanthropic, cultural, marketing, and or personal funding goals? So as a starter, how can I help you comprehensively meet the needs of individuals, families, and the community? And so as we apply our networking mindset to this analysis and planning, we have to ask who can provide the much needed inputs to help us round out and round up our efforts where we are underperforming. And balance is one of the primary keys to sustainability. So measuring the balance within your organization, your network, and all of your relationships will provide actionable information which may be hidden from traditional analyses. And you all recognize your current financial mix and makeup, categorizing your donations and knowing how much each type of organization gives annually. And I hope that a large part of your regular resource analysis is understanding at what type of ask are you good and which could use a little bit of work. For example, if 80% of my funding is individual donors or, heaven forbid, a single major event, where are the introductions in my immediate network, my hub, and my extended network that will shift these imbalances into balance? And the questions that follow that is, how does our approach fit in our ecosystem? How does our funding profile compare with the rest of the industry? Which funders and funding profile are providing support to organizations similar to us? Where are the gaps in my funding strategy, tactics, and execution? And finally, what is my capacity and how is that impacting my funding? So how can we align ourselves with funders' goals? Let's try on relationship development versus transactional funding. So in scenario 1, the transaction goes something like this. If you give me $10,000, I will provide a program enriching 1,000 lives in your area of funding interest. And I know in my darker moments, I've written something like this. Even with a little more meat on the bones, this amounts to a transaction. So now if we look at scenario 2, we begin with a networking growth mindset and offer to enter into a relationship, something like this. I know I've inventoried our network, enhanced strengths, and I know I can do something for you. So can I suggest that through a partnership with my organization, together, we can more comprehensively meet the needs of individuals, families, their community, and the funders' area of interest goals. So activating both direct capabilities and our extended network with a focus on your goals over our resource needs is the key to delivering on that promise. So our most important, our most important role is the conduit between the funder and the grassroots constituency. It is through us that goals are reached, objectives are met, and new opportunities are born. So by aligning with the funder goals and developing resources to meet them, we simplify the development process, we clearly define the delivery mechanisms, and collaboratively develop the efficacy measurements, which make sense to all parties. And this also opens the door to direct inputs from the constituencies themselves. And this relationship broadens the appeal to the funder, and we may find marketing, community commitment, executive personal priorities all activated through this mindset. And so if you can't see it, management becomes more difficult or impossible. Measurements are without question the most important inputs to internal planning and network resource development. But it also helps to define and strengthen the relationships we develop. So in the funding relationship, we are partnering to mutually meet a need. And if we fail in a relationship, we fail together and grow from there. If we succeed together and we grow from there. And if we take a page out of business management, there's no such thing as a complete failure unless we fail to learn from it. And then finally, I'll leave you with a score update while I return the screen to Michael. Stop share.
Perfect. Thank you, John.
You have the screen back.
We've got the screen back. And next up is Karen Foley. Karen, I will go ahead and let you share your screen.
Good morning, everyone. As I get here and share my screen, I want to follow up on John's really helpful perspective. And I think we can all agree that there's discipline and commitment and a time-consuming but valuable and needed process. So I want to really focus in on one kind of funding that takes advantage of what John has just shared with us and taken us through. And that is to answer the question, should you enter a beauty contest? I'm going to define that term in a moment, but let me just show you something here. I won't read through all these facts. You can find them in the 2021 Forefront presentation that they've done. Just Google it. But there are about 5,700 foundations listed in Illinois and 69,000 not-for-profits. So the competition is pretty fierce. Most of the $4.9 billion that was distributed last year really concentrated in the top 10. You can see where the top funding priorities are. But what that means for most of us is that there are many more smaller grants to go after. And we want to use John's framework to be strategic about which ones. So let me talk about a particular type. And that is what I call the beauty contest grant opportunity. And I say that with a lot of affection and certainly with tons of respect. What does that mean, though? Let's just define that term. And then I'm going to give you an example. Beauty contest grant opportunities typically are one-time opportunities, or they're time limited. You can apply once and then you cannot apply again for a couple of years. Sometimes the foundation might operate in several states or locations, and Chicago might not be their hometown. And so there's an element of uncertainty about whether or not your project makes it to the board's attention because they don't live here and they don't really know. There are typically multiple steps in the process to go for these, and sometimes, frankly, they can even be more time-consuming than building relationships with long-time funders. So by definition, they're not renewable. Even so, some of these beauty contest grant opportunities will require you to hire new people. So when should we think about applying for them? I've outlined here 3 scenarios that are condition precedents, at least for our organizations. And I offer these up to you as a way to think about, should I invest the time, the effort, do the research, build the relationships? And I think there are 3 scenarios under which you should seriously consider walking down that aisle and entering that contest. The first is when you're trying to attract additional longer term, more sustainable funding by doing one of 2 things. One is getting in some additional funding. You know, it's not going to be renewable, but for that year, it allows you to grow your service stats, more clients served, more partners in your program. And then what you do with other funders is you say, look where we are right now. Can you help us keep this going? Here's the impact that we're making in our community. The second is when you're trying to conduct a pilot for proof of concept, and that can be very powerful. Jim mentioned the Grandmothers Project. We have been working on that with Jim for quite a while. There's no project here right now, but we have actually gotten some funding for that as a result of proving our concept that this is an effective way of working in the community. The second way I'd suggest you think about it is if you want to fund a specific piece of equipment or operational goal or a CapEx project. And there are some out there that will actually fund this. Many funders that do renewable will not fund this category, but sometimes these beauty contest grants will. And then I added 3. I don't know if anybody would ever reach the 3rd condition. Certainly we don't. We never have therapists in our organization just, you know, on the sidelines waiting to get to the kids or the families. But I imagine it could be possible, so I added it. All right, now we know what it is. Let's take a look. We have, over the last 5 years, been awarded well over $2 million in these kinds of grants. And we understand they're not sustainable, but they have been tremendously powerful in terms of being able for us to build on our successes. Let me just give you 2 different examples here, concrete examples. Service Club is a group of women who come together and do great project work. 6 years ago, we went to them, and this is kind of a one-time thing. You can't go back year after year. And they gave us money, about $12,000, so we could buy some servers. Last year, we went back to them and said, we're working with Microsoft, I don't know what it is, 7. It was so old, it wasn't being supported anymore. And we asked them to fund our transition to Microsoft 365, which they did, which was fantastic. So a very concrete example of an operational need we needed. Saul Zaentz Foundation, which is by invitation only, about 5 years ago, gave us a $1 million grant to do a 3-year proof of pilot concept. Now, we had 120-year history. We'd been working in schools for over 15 years when we went to them. And we'd had this little program called Connect to Kids. It's a teacher intervention program that helps children regulate their behaviors in the classroom, and it's a mental health intervention. And they gave us this money. We were then able to use the results of that 3-year pilot. We developed an evaluation out of it. We developed marketing materials. The results were really pretty stunning. And so we were able to use that to attract additional long-term, more sustainable funding. And one of the things that we did, and John talked about building relationships, is the Illinois Children's Healthcare Foundation is a foundation that we had not been able to get any funding out of, but we sent them the evaluation. We spoke with their director, Amy Sterin, who's fantastic. And sometime later, we put in a proposal and we talked to Amy, and she actually asked us to withdraw it, which is a little stunning and a little concerning. But the reason she asked us to withdraw it is she liked the proposal so much. I think it was influenced by the work that we had been able to do with Saul Zaentz, that she asked us to resubmit 3 separate proposals hitting 3 different zip code needs. So that was, I think that just shows you the progression of how we used Saul Zaentz. They do some long-term funding, but for us, they were really in what we call the beauty contest. And they're just wonderful organization. Let me give you a concrete example also about one of these contests with Invest for Kids. If you're not familiar with this organization, I'm not going to read this here, but you can take a look. It was created by Ron Levin and Ben Kovler. They fund this huge conference for investors, and all the profits then are distributed to not-for-profits, and it's typically a one-time gift. Now, I had known Ron from a prior organization that I worked with that they had funded, so there was a relationship there. Now, we tried a couple of times to engage Invest for Kids in our organizational program, but it just never really stuck. However, based on the work with Saul Zantz, funding our pilot, we were able then to go back to Invest for Kids, show them the research, talk about the project, and they invited us to a conversation. This is what I want to show you about the steps involved in these kinds of grant initiatives. They're long, they're extensive. So, we had an initial conversation, which led to us developing this comprehensive presentation. We met with Ron in a formal interview. Here's what I can tell you about that interview. Clearly, Ron, who works at Goldman Sachs as a partner, is a very sophisticated investor. And he was asking us questions that I really couldn't answer off the tip of my tongue. And part of the reason for that is it wasn't about the programming. The programming I had down solid, but I didn't have some of those other sort of statistics. What's the average length of a school partnership, for example? And that's information that I was having to manually gather and recreate. And I didn't have a good looking dashboard to present it. And so in a way, we were sub-optimizing the value of our program because our presentation wasn't really top notch.
Karen,
So
we're coming up on time here. So if we could just start to
almost
wrap up.
done.
Thank
Right?
you.
Thank you. No, thanks, Michael. So here's what I want to say. In this particular instance, after talking with the foundation, we actually rewrote our proposal and we asked for funding to help us find an electronic management record system. We weren't sure that it would work, but it hit one of our key criteria. And we got that grant for $190,000. This is now positioning us to go after other larger grants like federal grants that require a lot more information delivered very quickly and in a format that's very compelling. So I can't tell you whether you should enter a beauty contest. All I can say is if you use John's framework, sometimes like JPA, we've had some success. So go after the crown. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back, Michael. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. And next up, we have Griffin Amdur of the Chicago Furniture Bank. Griffin,
Hello,
I'll
all.
go ahead and turn it over to you. Sorry about that. I was looking for your floating head here.
Well, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, I do not have slides, so you're gonna sort of be stuck looking at me. So my name is Griffin Amdur. I founded the Chicago Furniture Bank and Honest Junk Company with my partner, Andrew. We're sort of going to be built off of John's pillar for revenue and also sort of works closely with Karen as well, because I think earned revenue and creating sort of social enterprises is it's a good way to get that one-off donations from those beauty contest foundations. So essentially, the Chicago Furniture Bank is a 501c3 social enterprises that furnishes 15 homes per day for 400 nonprofit partners around Chicagoland. Since starting in July of 2018, we've grown to the largest furniture bank in the country. We currently have 45 full-time employees. We furnished 3,300 homes in 2021. Honest Junk Company is the fully owned subsidiary of the CFB, and it's the country's first 501c3 residential hauling and corporate decommissioning FF&E service. And Honest Junk basically funds the Furniture Bank at this point. So what makes our organization is unique is that we cover a significant portion of our operating budget through earned revenue. And my definition of earned revenue is money that's earned from the operations of the organization's activities. That's basically anything but grants and fundraising. So how our model works with the Furniture Bank and Honest Junk is that we charge to pick up and we essentially give it away for free. So I personally think that more nonprofits should create social enterprises that complements their programming for 3 reasons. The first and most important reason is they'll give you a different perspective on your underlying mission and programming. For example, if you're a workforce development nonprofit and you start a social enterprise venture, you hire from those participants in your program, you will learn what holes are in your training to make participants job ready. For us, the CFB, our thought process is how can we get more high quality furniture and earn more cash? Our solution was the creation of Honest Junk that charges market rates for its removal service, will take it all on your schedule, and ends up leading to more higher quality furniture. And you might think, how does an organization with the word junk in it lead to higher quality furniture? And that's because wealthier people want stuff picked up on their schedule, right? They don't want to wait until the charity is available. They want it done all at once. They want it all taken out at once. They want it to go to organizations. So people are willing to pay a premium actually in order to, hey, I'm home at 9 a.m. on Friday, come then, take it all, give it away to good distributing nonprofits, and that actually leads to higher quality furniture. So the second reason that generating earned revenue is important is it draws a completely different pool of funders. In our mind, or in my mind, there's two different groups of funders. One group being mission focused with the goal of how do we furnish as many homes as possible, right? So caring about the underlying mission. The second group of funders is more valued focused with the idea of how can my donated dollar be stretched to have the furthest impact for the mission that I care about. For example, if you cover 80% of your operating budget through earned revenue, that means that every donated dollar creates $5 worth of cash flow for your organization. So it's basically every dollar I donate, it's a $5 donation that I'm giving, right? And as I'm sure you guys have experienced from matching grant campaigns, people like knowing that their donations get multiplied and feel like they've gotten the best bang for their buck. So the third reason why I think earned revenue and creating a social enterprise is critical for growing the impact of your mission is the ability to take on debt to scale to grow the operations, the capacity of your operations. So there's a significant amount of foundations that are willing to issue low interest and no interest loans to nonprofits. This is because they can write off the difference between the market rate of interest as a donation. So for example, if your organization covers 50% of its costs through earned revenue and receives a 0% interest $100,000 loan, assuming you spent those activities that will continue generating 50% of your costs through earned revenue, you essentially only need to pay back $50,000 of that loan because you generated $50K in cash. Obviously, you'll need to raise that $50K, but that's a lot easier than raising that $100,000. And another critical part of taking on debt, it allows you to act fast in order to be more opportunistic, right? If you need to set up a capital campaign, raise all the money to then jump on the opportunity, that opportunity might not be there. For us, for example, we saw a warehouse that we really wanted to buy. We were able, because we generated a lot of cash flows, we were able to get a pretty high loan to value mortgage, buy that warehouse, and then launch that capital campaign to pay back down that mortgage, right? But if we couldn't take on that mortgage, couldn't take on that debt, the opportunity in our case, the warehouse wouldn't have been there. So I personally think there's a lot of opportunity for social enterprises to be started in lower skilled, harder to differentiate industries. In the end of the day, the CFB is basically a moving company. Honest Junk is essentially a junk removal service, a hauling service. If you can differ yourself from a social cause and otherwise undifferentiated industry, you can actually charge a premium over market rates and still gain market share. And that's because people essentially place additional value on the mission aspect. For us, it's furnishing homes for people, families and individuals leaving shelters, or, and wanting to know that their goods are going to our nonprofit partners that distribute the goods and not thrown away. And people, we might not be the quickest showing up right on, within 24 hours. We're definitely not the cheapest in terms of Honest Junk. You can get your stuff thrown away for cheaper. But people are willing to pay for us because they add that value on those social causes. So you can charge a premium as well as you sort of have that same underlying basic level of service. Yeah, that's all I got.
Well, that was great, Griffin. That was a lot of wonderful information. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Lara Starr of Community Health. Lara, I will go ahead and let you share your screen.
Great, thank you. Alrighty. So I took sort of a tactical approach here, and a word that I like to use for networking is a made-up word that many of you have probably heard lots of times if you work in fundraising, and that's friend raising. So I like to think about networking as building friends, and this just really builds on the points that John was making about building relationships. So first, I start with asking, why do we need friends? We need friends to volunteer for our organization. I work for Community Health, a volunteer-based free health clinic, and our workforce is made up of not only 40 paid staff, but over 1,000 volunteers who donate their time. We also need friends to donate to support our mission and help us pay for all of the expenses to run the organization. We need friends to refer others to us. Those are clients, those are volunteers, those are other donors. And we need friends to improve the experience of our clients when they're coming through the doors at Community Health. So these are all of the reasons that we need to raise our friends in order to play the long game of raising our funds. So this is a tactical example of an activity that I actually did with our board of directors at our last board retreat, where I asked them to build their own hub and spoke model here and figure out what are the categories where they interact regularly with other people. And so I have some examples here, but it could be anything. It could be a choir that you sing in. It could be other parents at your children's school. I asked each of them to just come up with 5 different categories and ways that they interact with other people, and then come up with one person in each of those categories who might be interested in hearing a little bit about community health. And then I took that and I said, what do you do with those names? And this is a picture of a donor cycle. And the thing that I wanted to point out to them is that there are 4 different categories in this donor cycle, and solicitation is the tiniest piece of it. Many people, when they haven't fundraised before, can be a little bit intimidated by the idea of asking someone for money, but there's so much more that goes into it than that. And so there are a number of examples here of things that you can do in each of these other categories: acquisition, cultivation, and stewardship, that are very approachable. It's not difficult to invite someone to an event. It's not difficult to share a social media post. And so what I asked them to do is to make a plan for each of those people they identified in that hub and spoke, to figure out how they can go about telling this person about community health, how they get them into this cycle. And I'm here to help them along the way. So in many cases, I've found that if we're building the relationship properly, we often don't even need to make the fundraising ask. We have this conversation about the organization, we have this conversation about our needs, and many times if you've built that strong relationship, the donor will offer. And so just to share one quick example of a success that we've had doing this, I had a fundraising visit, and it was really just a stewardship visit. This was just a catch up with a long-term donor of the organization. And during this visit, the donor said, oh, you know, I would like to introduce you to this other organization. They're doing good work as well. But one of the things that happens for many of our patients is that they might be living in conditions that they don't have good air circulation. They don't have good water quality. They have lead paint in their apartments, things like that, that really impact their health, for which we as a health clinic can't really do anything to help. And one thing that she did is introduce us to an organization that does exactly that. They remediate these issues in people's homes, and made it so that we put together a project. We're working together where we can provide some education to our patients about how these things impact their health. And this other organization is able to come in and actually remediate some of these problems actively with them. And in exchange for putting this collaboration together, we were able to actually secure some additional funding, significant additional funding for both of us to make it happen. And so I'll just close out with the adage that I find to be incredibly true. If you want advice, ask people for money. And if you want money, ask for advice. This is an example of exactly what happened with the creation of our Healthy at Homes program. We talked about what these issues our patients were facing in their health and how could we address it. And this donor helped us figure out a way to make it happen and provided the money to support it as well. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura. And that is an adage that we've heard actually from John at one of our past sessions. So reiterating that and really paying attention there. All right, next up we have Sherry Gibson. Sherry, I will go ahead and have you share your screen.
Okay. Did it.
You did it and it looks great. We're ready for you.
All right. So I'm not going to go through each of these slides because I believe, how do I get to the next page?
You should be able to click your arrows to direct the screen on your keyboard, or click on the screen itself. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not going to go through each of these slides. I created it as at the request of Michael, and I'm just going to allow you guys to view it at your leisure. But I am a director of philanthropy. I've been a fundraiser for over 20 years. And one of the things that I just want to cover real quick, because fundraising, it can be complicated. And I work with a number of organizations as a development director, vice president, grants and contracts, you name it. I've kind of sat in those seats. And it's for an organization that's thinking about, or thinking about, or that they're as a nonprofit or a mission-driven organization with a social purpose, which Griffin talks so eloquently about. I've been very involved in the social enterprise arena. There's a lot of different aspects to raising money, attracting donors. So I just want to kind of give a broad stroke overview of what that looks like as a fundraiser. And one of the areas that, going into an organization as a development director or as a volunteer, I like to work with the leadership and, looking at what type of fundraising plan that they have in place, what the staffing patterns look like. Is there a development director? Is there special events? What area of focus, or what are their gaps in their fundraising plan? So with that said, I agree. Like I said, with John's 5 phases of development, I take all of that into consideration. And like I said, with Griffin talking about social enterprises, that being able to attract and understand how to generate earned income, and that, over the long term would be unrestricted money. And Karen's presentation on grants. I mean, as a development professional, my area of expertise is grants, which a lot of fundraisers do not like to do. So, Karen's smiling. Yeah, they just don't like to write grants. And the last organization that I worked for, I had a $50 million grants and contracts portfolio that I had to manage, and it brought me a lot of joy. So, just looking at and understanding and working with the leadership and the board of directors, and Laura did talk about, engaging the board on, that fundraising campaign. So, all of these aspects you need to think about, as a nonprofit or as a mission-driven organization, to take all of this into consideration. And my best approach is to put it on paper, have a plan, work with the leadership to identify, like I said, what the staffing plan look like, and what are the areas that you'd like to see raise money and, to support those different programs and services. So let me see, I wrote myself some notes here. One of the areas, let me just say this, one of the areas that I focus very heavily on going in to a new funding stream or funding source is I approach it from a business development perspective. I came from the for-profit world over 20 years ago. John Noble, I don't know, you don't remember me, but I was the vice president of grants at Jobs for Youth. You and I met on a number of occasions. And so I just approach new funding opportunities from a sales perspective. I go in with marketing material. I work with, either a data analytics person to pull metrics, share those with the funder on the front end, get a meeting. And 9 times out of 10, especially as it relates to grants, Karen, I can get an approval on that grant because I sell it before I even submit a proposal. So 9 times out of 10, the foundation will invite you, or government agency will invite you to apply for that grant. And that's what I try to get without blindly submitting a proposal to an organization or a foundation that's receiving thousands of them. So because they're looking for mine. So, I just, like I said, data is important, metrics are important. those sales collateral pieces are important. And if you can be as smart as Griffin, what he's done with the furniture banks, I know a number of social enterprise, being able to create that mission-driven organization where you are attracting social investors. It's a godsend. So I've just, been very, very privileged to just have a very well-rounded career in development, for the for-profit and the nonprofit, applying for grants and bidding on contracts through procurement. And I start with 99% of the time, I start with selling the program on the front end. So my slides that Michael is in possession of, there's information on that and what I've just touched on. And I would be willing to talk to you. I love fundraising, I love grant writing, and I know a lot about social entrepreneurship. So I'd be willing to have a conversation, and that's it.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Sherry. And as Sherry mentioned, she has a number of slides here that she's prepared. Sherry, do you want to just quickly just thumb through the slides so people can see them, and then we can transition over to Jean.
Sure. So
and these slides will all be sent out to everyone post seminar.
Yeah. So this is just, it just depends on the organization. What are your areas of function, priority? In our case, the company I work for now, believe it or not, we're small. We're just over under a $3 million operating budget, but our annual event, we raise over $500,000. That's amazing. Hang on. And then this is just the types of areas of focus, what's philanthropy, donor relations, why donors give. Again, that strategy, that strategic planning on the front end, put it on paper, That way, and that's what John talked about, measurement. You can see, are you succeeding? Are you failing? You know where you stand, especially with, and then if people's jobs are dependent on you bringing in that revenue, you need to know that. And oftentimes you'll know if you're doing it right a year ahead of time before it happens. Vision, mission, program goals, donor relations. And again, I cannot say this enough. You're selling a product. You're selling your organization. You're selling the people. So, and if you go in and just, prepare the materials, send it out, follow up with a phone call, since we've been on COVID lockdown, we're Zooming these days, but get that meeting on the front end. I cannot stress that enough. And these are some of the quick tips on attracting new revenue. And again, you want to sustain the revenue that you have in place already, but new revenue is what I do best. And then, having that diversified funding stream. More importantly than anything, understand your financials, know where your money's coming from. I've often said at every organization I've worked for, me and the finance director joined at the hip. I need to know where the shortfalls are, where we are in terms of our revenue. And then I also added at the end here some philanthropic resources. I'm a former board of directors with AFP.
Amazing. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Sherry. And I appreciate you going through this. And we'll get through the resources as everyone sends those out. I even saw Forefront on there, and Forefront is one that actually we had a presenter from Forefront at our last session. So thank you, Sherry, and everyone. We will absolutely be getting those slides out to you. Next up, we have Jean Rosendale.
Okay, good.
So I can't share my screen because something's being shared. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry about that.
No problem.
That was on me. I just wanted everyone to see your lovely face.
So thanks. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me, guys. We've talked several times earlier today, just in the session, we've talked about building a relationship is more important than a transaction or an event. So some people have a hard time getting into that conversation though. How do I even start that? And there's ask reluctance, as somebody made reference to as well. So I'm here to talk about how you can make your ask easier and in the process, maybe even bigger. In order to do that, you really have to have three different principles, I think, applied. So two are very common for everybody here, I think, and that is building synergy in your networking with other organizations that offer other services. I was given an example early on in one of the early sessions. It was something like somebody who donated computers, but then understanding the actual family scenario, understanding, well, they don't have a place to put their computer. So working with the furniture donation organization, being able to provide a desk made a synergistic impact, and then finding out that the home environment wasn't conducive for study, and then bringing in another organization to provide mental health services actually made what was an individual contribution that was great to something that was life-changing. And so that was a common use of networking that we've been discussing. But it couldn't have happened if they didn't know the needs of that family in that example. So it was really understanding those and then combining those through other service providers in your network. Well, I was going to suggest you use the same principles, but apply them to a different audience. Apply them to a corporate or company audience. So what I'm going to suggest as a third principle is to make your ask easier by don't asking at all. But as some people have suggested here, understanding your audience and providing some value. So let me give you some examples of that. You want to replace the ask with an offer of value, and that's how you can get into a conversation much more easily. But you have to understand who your audience is, and the audience now is not who you provide services to, but it's a potential donor, and you have to understand their needs and what they value. And I don't mean the needs for your services, right? But needs for their business, as some people have brought up. So most companies will have informally, if nothing else, a corporate social responsibility mentality. They want to make a contribution to the local community that supports them. And that can be in form of money, it can be in-kind donations. They have equipment, furniture, they'll have extra office space, particularly these days, and certainly volunteers. And if nothing else, they're always looking for something to enhance their brand and to promote their brand, and to be able to have content for social media, to be able to say that a lot of our employees did this volunteering at this organization over the weekend. At the very least, there's a self-serving desire. And in many cases, the company just doesn't know who to give these things to or who to offer them to. So whoever gets into that conversation or builds a relationship with them is the one who gets it. And at the very least, always, universally, they all need customers. They all want outside resources. They need new employees if they're growing to replacement employees. They need consulting services from somebody. So all of these companies and corporate donor potentials, they need all of these things. So I would suggest that what you do is think about using your network and even things within your own assets within your own control, create something and combine them in a maybe different way to offer value to them. And that's how you get in the conversation. So one of the examples that I have was a small local college that I was working with on another topic, and they were looking for more company donations with local companies. They said many of the local companies really do want to make a contribution to the local community, but they don't know how to get into the conversation. The board members and the development officers found it difficult to get into that conversation. They didn't relate so much necessarily to company owners, CEOs of large companies. So I asked them to assemble parts that they may already have. Now, they already had a partially empty, beautiful building that was a convent. They had large gathering rooms in that area and small rooms where the nuns used to live. And these were all vacant. They did teach business classes, so they had business professors there at the school. And they had dorms on site, so they did have a food service. So what I explained to them was that this is perfect for a venue for corporate planning retreats. This is one of the things that companies never do. This is one example that executives, if you ask them, what do you do for your executive planning retreats? They'll always say, well, we know we're supposed to do them. We just can't get around to it. But this is a perfect example where they could even do it over multiple days because they have They had the small rooms that they can stay in. They had business professors that could be facilitators that could actually make presentations on topics. And they had food service to provide even overnight and into the multiple days. These are very difficult environments for corporate executives to find to do a retreat. And here they had the component parts. They just saw them as just loose ends or things that had other purposes. Combining them in this way cost them nothing, but they packaged it so that now everybody, the board members, the development officers, they could just network and bump into business owners, executives, and start the conversation of what do you do for your executive planning retreats. And immediately they found out that people were highly engaged at the executive level on an executive topic that they wanted to know about. So from there, it became super easy for them to start asking them questions like, well, what are you doing to make your contribution to the local community that supports you? And they were easily in the conversation. They started to build a relationship, and they found that it was so much easier to get a number of these forms of donations applied to the university. So anyway, so I would suggest looking for synergy in your network, even if you don't have a combination of assets this significant, you can combine them with other people that you work with, not just to provide your services, but to be able to provide some kind of value to the donor community that would be companies or corporations. So that was my example.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Jean. All right, next up we have Stephanie. And Stephanie, I'm going to go ahead and share your slides.
Thank you. Perfect. Hi, everyone. So I am the Vice President of Programs at Cole Children's Museum. We provide hands-on, play-based learning experiences for children aged birth to 8. And many people know us for our Children's Museum in Glenview. But today I'm going to talk about our programs in Lake County. And really what I'm going to do is just tell a quick story that's going to reiterate what a lot of the presenters have already talked about. And so in Lake County, prior to 2018, the museum did some small programming, a one-day event at a public library, for example, or a school would invite us in for a family event. But we really didn't have a whole lot of involvement in the community. We also had very little funding for work in that area of the community. In 2018, I met with the then mayor of Waukegan to talk about how we could have a stronger connection in the community. We then, how we wanted to be a more consistent partner, and we came up with what was called the Pop-Up Museum Program. And so what we did there is we found a vacant location, as you can see a storefront here, and we created a mobile or a children's museum that would come in for a month or two at a time, and then move to another location. We started in Waukegan. And we raised funding from foundations, large and small corporations, a lot of local small corporations, and then some individuals. And then we scaled up this program so that we were in 3 communities, 2 months apiece by February of 2020. And you can see where this is going to go really quickly because you cannot have that many people in a building in March of 2020. When COVID closed everything down. So at that point, we were actually at risk of losing our funding or at best having our funding frozen because we couldn't provide the services that we had talked about. But we also knew at the time that children and parents and teachers needed our services more than ever. They just had to look different. And so in 2020, Michael, if you want to switch to the next slide, thank you. We worked really closely with the key stakeholders in the 3 communities that we were working with. Principals, teachers, nonprofit organizations, the government officials in those communities. And we really reassessed what the community's needs were. And each community had slightly different strengths, needs. We didn't want to duplicate what was already happening. And so what we ended up doing is bringing together not only the community partners and our program staff and our fundraising staff, but we brought those funders in too and really said, listen, we're in a really unique situation. We want to be able to help in some way. Let's make sure that we're able to provide what each community needs, what each school needs, what families need. And so we were able to come up with some unique programming. One of the things we did is virtual field trips so that we were able to, just like this, present a hands-on fun workshop for young children. We shipped materials to the classroom or the children's homes so that they could participate with our education specialists. As was mentioned early in the presentation, we had home learning kits, science kits, and math kits. The teachers told us that children didn't have the materials they needed at home to do the lessons. A ruler, a magnifying glass, a set of paints that they could use. And so we created that with instructions for families in English and in Spanish so that they could do some learning at home as well, knowing that parents were taking on a large chunk of learning that they were not prepared for. And then the other thing we did, which you can see here in the pictures, we had a mobile learning lab. So instead of having the pop-up museum, which was inside in a building in one place where everybody came together, we got a van, we wrapped the van, we got a lot of our materials and put them in the van and traveled around to different community partners. And so we were at nonprofit organizations and schools and outside libraries. This was great because we could be outside. We could work with a small group of children or families at one time. And it was really flexible for us. So we really increased our funding through this whole networking and community connections. And we added a fourth community to the portfolio of programming. So in this really difficult time, we actually expanded our portfolio of what we were able to provide for people. So quickly, in the next slide, I have a couple quick key takeaways. One is relationships and trust are really essential, and this takes a lot of time to develop. You're not going in for one quick ask, and I think a lot of people have brought this up already. It's that friend raising. It's those times where you're coming together to talk about how to serve the community, not ask for money for a specific program. Program staff have a deep understanding of the work on the ground and should be in your networking with funders. This should not just be the fundraising department, but the program staff should be deeply involved. They're the people that are actually doing a lot of the work and can answer a lot of the questions. Engaging the full community to co-create programs. Each one of our programs in each community looks different because each community, even though they're close to each other geographically, have unique strengths and unique needs. And so we want to make sure that we're tailoring that to the communities. And then what we've all learned is to really be stubborn about our goals and flexible with our methods.
Absolutely. I think that last one is not just in work, but in life too. All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Let me go ahead and switch over to our presenting screen here. So today we've heard from Karen, and we've talked about beauty contest grants and identifying a specific ask, a specific need, and then making that ask and going for it. We've heard from Griffin on earned revenue, social enterprise approach, and loan opportunities. We heard from Lara on Friendsgiving and how to activate our board and our networks in that way. We've heard from Sherry on the business development approach. And then Sherry has given us a plethora of slides with a more in-depth how-to and to use that approach with resources and everything combined. We heard from Jean about how to make the ask easier and how to make a bigger ask, and then how we actually don't ask throughout that whole process, but really truly look to offer value. And then we heard from Stephanie just now on how we make that funding shift based on the needs and include our community throughout the process overall. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my spotlights here and open up the floor to some Q&A to any of our guests here. And feel free when you ask a question to turn on your camera, turn on your mic, as we're here to network. And we will be providing the slides afterwards, so don't need to waste a question on that. There'll also be a recording of this session, as well as opportunities to network amongst each other. We'll share a contact list for anyone who's attended. And if you're not interested in having your contact information shared, just email me directly after the event and I'll make sure that that's not put out. So without further ado, any questions?
Yeah, Michael, let me kind of bring things together. In this presentation, you see that there's been a progression through the seminars of offering and showing you specific examples and specific methods and use of specific resources in order to implement programs and get done what your mission requires. And that's the kind of thing that we help you do. and the next few seminars are going to zero in more clearly on what exactly was done, the background and in the foreground, who is doing it in the organization and so on, and how it led to results and how it led to growth in your organization. So we'll be around here for another 10 or 15 minutes for question and answers, and I'll leave it back to you, Michael.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Questions from the group? I think everyone's just ready to go start implementing some of these tips. I see a lot of nodding heads. Well, while everyone kind of gathers their questions, I just want to take a moment to express thanks to each and every one of our speakers, as well as my co-hosts and support team here. I know there's a lot of information that was shared and will be distilled down as we kind of put these things into practice.
Michael, can I just add one?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Sherry.
For everybody that's chimed in, one of the things for development or fundraising is patience. And I can't stress that enough, that as you, whether you're doing an event, approaching an individual donor, or just cultivating a new foundation or government grant, patience. And as John Noble said earlier, a decline in your first request is not necessarily a bad thing. It gives you an opportunity to go back in and be better prepared the second time out. So just patience. That's all I can stress, because sometimes it could take years for me to bring in that big gift, but it comes. Just stay the course.
Thanks, Sherry. That's a great reminder.
I'm going to encourage everybody that attends these workshops to begin communicating with each other, because over the past 5 workshops, we do have examples of the network that developed through meeting people through these workshops, leading to some pretty significant results. And it's been sort of just a few folks that have really taken it upon themselves to reach out to everybody around them. But I'm going to encourage everyone to use this as sort of one of your hubs for networking and collaborations. Because I know that Jim sees this very, very clearly, that by combining all of the organizations here, we're really getting far more comprehensive than any one of us can do individually. So I'm really going to encourage you to be very mindful of who you're surrounded by in these workshops.
Awesome.
That's an incredible point, John. And I think to reiterate, we have definitely seen some great partnerships and great money opportunities, great funding opportunities specifically come out of relationships that have been built within this room here or within the organization. So if this is your first time, excited to introduce you to the group. If this is your 5th time, excited to have you to continue to join us here. For those of you who haven't joined in the past, we also have recordings from each of those initial seminars. So we'll make sure to send out those links. Jim, I saw you had your hand raised.
Okay, I just want to follow up on John. We just put in our notes here the Cole Family Museum of what they have. And we're involved, as we mentioned earlier, with situations in Evanston and wanting to build up the community and so on. So one of the key things we're going to do in the next few weeks is talk to Cole and talk to the mayor of Evanston and see whether we've got possibility for a synergy there, which I think we do.
Networking in real time. There we go. That didn't happen before. That wasn't pre-planned. That just happened now, everybody. Perfect. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and end this in the next minute or so here. I just want to say thank you again to all of our presenters for your time and insights. to our hosts for putting this on and creating this community, and for all of our guests for joining us here today and being part of this great workshop and opportunity to learn from, with, and network from and with each other.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.